My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sankaran, Guru Piran Neo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue Mahan's the I principle, the first principle. This is part 5 of our series on this first principle. And today I'm going to take some of the question and answer with Mahan. Disciples have asked him questions on the I, and he gives some explanation. I want to go through that explanation in a systematic way. So, as you know, that Swamiji spoke about, the small I and the big I. The small I is our material identity. We have the senses and all the experiences of taste, touch, smell, and all that imprints in us. Thoughts is a measure of experience, and all the experiences, material experiences, imprints as thoughts. These thoughts, we store it as memories. Some of it are, excellent, good thoughts, nice thoughts, happy thoughts. So we call it the Sugha thoughts, the thoughts that we really like and desire. And we also have thoughts that are the experiences that we get are challenging, sorrowful, unpleasant, misery. All those thoughts, those experiences also generates thoughts that we store in our memory bank. And over time, these thoughts, these experiences and the thoughts shapes our personality and worldview. And sometimes, if it's very enlightening, enriching, blissful thoughts and experiences, our personality becomes more and more blissful. And if the thoughts are challenging, tough, and a lot of miseries and a lot of sadness and a lot of shrunkenness, we see that our personality too is impacted by this. And oftentimes, a lot of our thoughts, a lot of our experiences are material in nature, and we are so entrenched and drenched in materiality. A lot of our thoughts and experiences are very material, and you see that our personality sometimes takes a very material personality, our titles and our positions and all these defines who the personality is. In that process, we forget who the true personality or the true identity is. There comes a stage that we ask, who are we? What are we? And state of confusion that takes place. So Mahan and great saints come in, through their own introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, using their inner scope. They dwell deep within themselves, slowly silencing and folding the material world into that spiritual realm. And slowly, they dwell into the more deeper, broader understanding of who the self is. And you see that the small I, which is so material in its nature, starts quietening down. As that quietens down, the expanded consciousness or the expanded experience of that big I starts to, emerge. And over time, there's a convergence that takes place. It's not decoupling, but a convergence that takes place so that the material personality, which is the big I, also can manifest as a small I, but in a more inspirational and more expanded state of consciousness, though operating in this material limited existence. So Swamiji shows this, through examples and through the practice of meditation. He shows that how one is able to fold that material personality, merge it in the big I or the spiritual personality. And when you are in the material world, how do you use that, material, how do you use the spiritual personality to influence all your material experiences and influence that material identity, so that while the material identity is operating in this limited material world, it is still in a very enriched, awesome, and inspirational state of operations within this material dimension. So you see that great saints and sages are, while operating in this material world, while the body is caught up with the forces of cause and effect, their mind, which runs that material body or manages the material body is not affected by the causes, the forces of material nature or the vagaries of life. So here Swamiji highlights, he explains this, he shows it, and then he takes on some of the questions that are asked by disciples. So he teaches through this question and answer session. So in one of the questions, the disciple asked, Swamiji, thou art drenched. That means he's getting wet. Probably there was a rain and he got wet. And Swamiji said, dear child, I never get drenched. I never get drenched. You see, and I experienced this too, during Swamiji's visit here. But you can clearly see that the disciples say, your body is drenched. You can see the water that is, your body, your clothes and all are drenched in water, and, the body is wet. So Swamiji asked the question back, is the body drenched? So the disciple thinks a little bit more carefully, and he says, no, my intellect is drenched. So what does that mean? Is the intellect wet? No, the intellect knows that something is getting wet. So the intellect thinks, so this whole idea of wet, being soaked, comes from where? Not from the body. The thinking comes from the intellect. So the intellect recognizes that the body is wet. Right? So here the intellect is making an inference that the body is wet. If the intellect did not know what wet is, it would not matter at all. So here he's probing a little bit more deeper in terms of that experiencer, that experience, the thought, and where all this comes from. So the disciple thinks carefully, no, I see you are wetting, I think you are wetting, so you must be wet. So he says, think very carefully. You see, is the intellect wet? No, he says that the intellect knows that the body is getting wet, right? So the body is not, is telling that the intellect makes an inference that the body gets wet. This is the next part that he asks. What is the body that is getting wet? It is the gross body that is getting wet. But is that who I am? You see? So that is why he says, I never get drenched. So the first part is I never get drenched. And when somebody says that, you say, but I see your body getting wet. So how can you say you are not getting wet? So this is the point. He says that I am the user of the body, but I'm not the body. You see, somewhat like the car is getting wet, but the driver is not getting wet. So in that same way, Swamiji proves, because this has got very deep meaning, right? So here he says that no, that the intellect knows that the body is getting wet, but I am not wet. So what does that mean? Why this means a lot is that when challenges come in our lives, sometimes, people ridicule us. Sometimes, poverty is there. Sometimes the body goes through, health issues and, disease. So here, Swamiji says that, yes, the body gets sick. The body is impacted by it, but I am not sick. I am not, impacted by this. The body can, disintegrate, but I don't disintegrate. The body can be amputated, but I will never be amputated. The word I, this word invisible is also coming from indivisible. You cannot divide it. You cannot say, I am separate. So this I he's talking about is indivisible. It cannot be touched by anything material. So if we associate ourselves with the body and you see that the body is amputated, you see, and if you associate very closely to the body, you feel, hey, something is missing. I'll give you an example of this. There are times where we see that people have an accident and they lose their limbs. Or there are times when people, are diabetic and they lose a foot or so on. And I know people that don't want to lose their foot because of disease. And when the amputation takes place, they wake up and they see their leg, and they pass away because they feel a part of them is not there. This is one group of people. But there are also people that, through accident or through birth, where they have limbs are not there. But what you see is that the spirit is very strong, that they put on artificial legs and they run a marathon, or they run 100 meters, or they climb the tree or climb the mountain. So no limitations of the body will limit the spirit, you know, no limitations of, the restrictions of the body or disease or poverty should impact that spirit. The spirit should always be indivisible, immortal, infinite. This is what Swamiji is telling in this, that the body may be wet, but I am not wet. The body may be impacted by disease. I am not impacted by disease. The body, may be impacted by many things. I am not touched by it. And this is what he's saying, that this, if I associate myself with the big I am transcendental. If I associate myself with this small I will always have that limitedness. And this is what he's trying to teach, the distinction between small I and big I. And this is beautifully said. Swamiji says, I renounce my land, because what does ownership actually mean? I don't come with anything. I don't take. One who has, attained that enlightened state, the I doesn't need a home. It occupies the body, but, the body is to experience this material world. So one who becomes, enlightened, they see that no material wants and needs have an impact, on them. He says, my kith and kin, this is the material, biological, family. He says that, I am transcendental to that. I'm transcendental to the place and my, belief systems. He says, I am transcendental to birth and death. Because I'm transcendental, I don't become a corpse. The body only becomes a corpse, but I never become a corpse, because there's neither birth nor death. And he says that I remain what I am, and I can end whatever I want to do and become whatever I want to do. He says that I is actually the seat of wisdom, that big I that he's talking about. So he beautifully captures this, in Tamil, and this is the English translation. So what does that mean? So I want to come back to this example of this rain or the wetness. So let's probe a little bit more deeper on peering into ourselves to see what is impacted. Right? So if you look at our body, this is our human body, with all those things. So if the rain falls on it, obviously the body is getting wet. But you have to remember, the rain is also molecules, right? And our body is also made out of molecules. So we see that, as Swamiji reveals, that look, if you look at the body in a gross way, that is, you see the separation. But as we go deeper, we see that the body is made out of atoms, and the atoms made out of protons. Swamiji speaks about light, and it goes on to, more minuter, and it goes on to vibration and unarvu, and finally it goes on to irul. Now I want to ask the question, the rain has fallen. What is it that it touches? Or what is it that, does it touch the irul? Does it touch the vibration level? Does it touch at the quarks level or the proton electrons level? Does it touch at the cellular level? What is it that is impacted by this wetness? In that same way, if we ask this question of this gross body, so yes, the gross body experiences many things, but as you become more and more subtle, we see that you're not touched or perturbed by anything material. So which is quite interesting, because, already in that first stage, we already transcend that wetness. So as we go deeper and deeper, we come to that Iru state, the state of silence, or the universal personality, or the higher order continuum. Whatever at the material level, will slowly dissipate or fold back in. Very similar to the ocean, right? As long as we are on the surface of the ocean, we will feel the waves and waves after waves, and some waves will be very big, some waves will be very small. We go through ups and downs. But as our mind descends deeper into the ocean, you still feel the waves as you are going deeper. As you go deeper and deeper and deeper, slowly the waves start disappearing or dissipating, and there comes a point that you don't experience the waves at all. A sense of serenity, a sense of calmness, a sense of blissfulness. You see beautiful fish passing through, things that you've never seen before. And as you go deeper and deeper, the light that gave you could see the fish also starts diminishing. As you go deeper and deeper, you come to the quietude of the ocean, and beneath the ocean, where you're touching the floor, it has its own current. The current has its own trajectory. In that same way, as we are in the surface of materiality, we will experience many things, ups and downs. As our mind descends deeper and deeper, we will see some beautiful things, beautiful experiences, calm, blissful, nice feeling, enlightening feeling. All that are still like watching the beautiful, fish. As we go deeper, even that disappears. Even the feeling of the unarva disappears, and you attain that blissful quietude where light doesn't penetrate, and all you're feeling is that force that is driving that trajectory. And that force is none other than that higher order continuum, which is the ego. So Swamiji says that this is what the seat of wisdom is. So it's a beautiful saying, that when I attain nothing, I've got everything, because that's the building block of everything. So what we see here is that, so the question I have is, so what gets wet? At what stage do we get wet? As long as we are on the surface, we are impacted by this material world. So we have to gain the strength at that most subtlest level. Our mind is calm, peaceful, quietude, and take that quietude and the calmness that gives us clarity to be able to engage the turbulent world. Does it mean that the masters don't experience that turbulent ocean? Yes, they do. You see, as long as they're operating in the material world, they will do. But what the difference is that they know how to navigate through this, waves, hold on to the boat very strongly and steer the boat, and sometimes go with the waves so that you are able to not only ride the waves, but ride the waves, enjoy those experiences of those waves, and steer towards more calm and more smoother ride. So we see that sublimity, that quietude gives us that clarity to be able to understand who we are, and also be able to understand the vibration, understand the light that permeates in us, understand at the cellular level who we are, and more importantly, at the material identity level, who we are and what we are, and how to navigate our mind and our material intellect, our intellect and our mind and our material body towards this ups and downs of life, taking all the challenges and transforming that into opportunities for learning, transforming all our scars into stars to become a source of enlightenment. And we see that even the ride sometimes say, wow, this is a beautiful experience. So this is what Swamiji taught us. So what we see here is that when we understand this, we realize that everything that we are experiencing is because of the cosmic intelligence. That is the source of our vibrations. That is the source of our illumination. That is the source of our biology. And that is the source of all our experiences. So whether it's challenging experiences or good experiences, we learn to use that as a combustion for our enlightenment. And this is what that beautiful philosophy that this great Mahan has shown us. So this is what our small identity is. The small identity is also a manifestation of the big identity. And every day you fold that into the big identity and re-emerge back with full of inspiration and energy and strength and focus to take on that world, like how a navigator that is really, really prepared to take on whatever challenges of life and learn from it, and learn from it and learn to outlive it. So, and this is the part that is, so we talked about the biology, and then disciples ask, so how did the worlds originate? So again, starting from that Irul, starting from this, I've shown you how slowly it blossomed into, from the Irul to vibrations to light to atoms and molecules to all matter and energy, and finally to the worlds that we have. And that includes our body and our mind and our intellect and our own consciousness. So Swamiji gives that imprint of that cosmic intelligence in everything that is out there. The same thing Swamiji gives, a second explanation. It started off with this indestructible matter. Matter here, the Tamil word is porul, is he? So he says that Irul cannot be destructed. It's indivisible, right? And the cosmic intelligence is part of that indestructible, indivisible, is part and parcel of us. Somehow the mind has forgotten it. The mind sees it as a material world that is divisible and destructible. Hence, the mind also experiences those. But when the mind gets the inspiration of the Irul, that higher order continuum, which is indestructible, indivisible, and while it's operating in this material world, it carries that glory, it carries that aura of indestructibility, indivisibility, infinite, while it's still in the finite world. So you see that he then explains all that we see this material world has that imprint, whether it's the material, whether it's our suns and stars and galaxies and everything in this material world has that imprint. Only the human mind forgets it. So Swamiji then goes on to, the question comes, who created then all this? Who created God? He says the soul God manifested as us. We are a manifestation of God. We are God in different forms. So, and we created God, right? So we are a manifestation of God, and we have given God that identity. And if you see everything that we see in this material universe, everything was created from the human mind, including God, including the mantras, including everything, because everything that we create comes from within ourselves. So part of that divinity, actually all of divinity is within us. So if we want to discover God, where is the closest place to go? It is the zero distance from us, that is within us. And this is what Swamiji says, that we created God. God is part and parcel of us. We are God in different forms. So the prayer should start with us. If the prayer is not from us, within us, no prayer will satisfy or reveal this divinity. If the pilgrimage doesn't start with us, no pilgrimage will lead you to that God realization. If we don't see that divinity within ourselves, we will not see divinity in anything that we touch and anything that is around us. The lens of God is within all of us. And if we put that on, everything we see is divine and godly. So again, Swamiji explains, when will God cease to exist? This is the part. When we realize God in its entirety, right? Which means that no place that we see any, defects, we're able to meet everything, that man can and will are able to achieve. So he says that when hunger is not there, when people are Don't have hunger. Normally, when people are hungry, they call for, they cannot get anything. They are hoping that something will give. And that hope is what gives that God, the hope of God will come. If we satisfy that hunger, he says, you see that one part of asking is no more there. The same thing with disease and mental torments. If we are able to overcome all these challenges, we come to that ideal state of existence, the state of completeness, the state of full, wholesomeness, the state of paripurnam. We see that we would not go in search of God, because that paripurnam, or the completeness or wholesomeness, means that I don't have to search for God anywhere. He is part and, God is part and parcel of me. There is nothing to search for. There's nothing to crave for. God is within me. And if the mind is inspired by that, the mind, then aspires. When the mind is inspired by the divinity, the mind aspires to inspire everything with the divinity. And this is the beautiful part, that you would not search for, something, when the inspiration is there, that's the aspiration to inspire everything that we see, touch, hear with that divine lens. And this is what Swamiji is saying. The day we have that, limitedness, we see that there is a point where our mind is not wholesome or complete, or the paripurnam. And we have to recalibrate back to bring it back. And you see that as we do that, we become more calmer, we become more cooler, and you see that whatever we do becomes really inspirational. So this is the philosophy of Paranjyothi Mahan. So he's giving an explanation of what this I philosophy is, the big I and the small I. And more importantly, he's showing by example what this inspired mind would be when it's inspired by this big I. In the next class, I will take on more questions and how Swamiji illumines the disciples with more deeper probing questions on the big I. Sandosham.